We're getting on Facebook Live.
Facebook Live, coming in.
Going live.
Hi. Hope everybody is doing well today. We were just talking about the rainy season in Indonesia and how the Hadley is transitioned to needing a coat at 80 degrees. Who would have thought that?
All right. Oh, I can't wait to hear this, Hadley. I've got some friends who are interested in doing the same thing you're doing. So.
Oh, wow.
Well, man.
I think everybody does at this time, right?
10
Everybody's
would
thinking
recommend.
about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, 10 out of 10 would recommend.
Yeah, it's a good time to relook at life and how you live it and doing what you want to do, for sure. Okay, so I've got us live on Facebook, and Josh, you're letting people in, and see John Stewart and Nancy Bowers. Hello, everybody, and Aunt Ann. And we got John Keister and Tim McGee and some more others coming. So Josh, why don't you take us away?
Yeah, got it. Well, welcome, guys. Happy Monday. Hope everybody's having a good start to the week. We have a great episode today. So hearing from Hadley Driscoll over in Indonesia. So here to tell us a little bit about moving abroad, working abroad, and answering some questions. I think some of us all have, at least if not personally interested, have some family members who've probably talked about this before. I know I do. So before we get started, just a heads up, as every week, check out the Facebook site, Intrepid Spirits Network, and you can reconnect with anybody here on the call or from past calls. Also, videos of all the past calls and episodes are on there as well. Would also remind you that during the conversation today, please feel free to post on the chat any questions to Hadley, thoughts, or shares, so we can bring that up and continue the conversation. So with that, I'll pass it over to Dill and Susan.
All right,
Here you go. The sea is dangerous and its storms are terrible, but these have never been sufficient reasons to remain ashore. Unlike timid souls, intrepid spirits seek victory over those things that seem impossible. It is with an iron will that they embark in the most daring of all adventures to meet the shadowy future without fear and conquer the unknown. Quick thought starter to start. With all the things that are going on these days, with all the battles and whatnot, I was reading a book called With the Old Breed. It's about the horrible battles of the World War II in the Pacific Theater. And it reminds me of the battles we were fighting in Congress now. And one of the guys, after it was all said and done, said a great quote. He said, "After war is over, it is deceptively easy to determine which battles were essential and which could have gone unfought." And what goes on today in our world, I think there's a interesting, I think when this all shakes out, I think that's going to be a thought starter for sure. So anyway, without that, Sunshine, it's all yours.
Great. All right. Well, today we have probably one of our most special guests. Not that everybody else isn't special, but Hadley is definitely our intrepid spirits of the family. We have quite a few in this family, I think. But Hadley is going to share with us her last year or so of an adventure. And as a parent, it's been an adventure, and as herself, it's been an adventure. So Hadley, I'm going to let you just take over and tell us about being an intrepid spirit.
Okay, I will just get right into it. So 1 year ago, I shocked everyone by quitting my job with no plan on what I would do next. Rewind 5 years prior to that, and I had just arrived in the village of Lake Placid, New York, for an internship with the Olympic Regional Development Authority, the organization that managed all of the Olympic venues that remained in Lake Placid following the 1980 Winter Olympics. During that time, I fell in love with the town, the history, and the potential. I returned to South Georgia that fall, ready to finish out my degree and get back to Lake Placid as fast as I could. As a matter of fact, I completed my entire senior year of college in one semester. I was that keen to move back to Lake Placid and pursue a career in corporate development for the Olympic Authority. I sat down that winter after arriving in Lake Placid and wrote out my goals for the next 5 years. I wanted to work in the event industry, definitely following in my dad's footsteps, preferably in snow sports. And I thought that my dream job would be the event director. I even wrote down being an event director. I even had written down in my journal that working for the New York Ski Educational Foundation would be a dream. NICEF is it's called. So fast forward 2 years, and I was approached by NICEF to work for them as their race director for all of the alpine events at Whiteface Mountain. I spent the next 3 years with NICEF, and I loved my job and the life I had built for myself in Lake Placid. I had a great group of friends. There were amazing adventures out my back door and a career that I genuinely enjoyed. I thought that this was like my dream come true. That's what I wanted. But I wasn't working for a national federation. I didn't have a fancy corporate job for a Fortune 500 company, so it still felt like it wasn't enough. My perception of achievement was based around my job and what I thought I should be wanting, as society had told me, big house, fancy car, you get the point. It still felt like something was missing. I had this feeling in my gut that I was capable of more. To be honest, I had no idea what it would look like. I just knew that the path I was on was no longer the right path for me. I just yearned for something that wasn't what everyone else was telling me I should be doing. So with about 3 months worth of savings, I handed in my resignation letter and started planning a sabbatical. It's important to note that at this point in my life, I needed to be hit over the head with a 2x4 by the universe in order to listen. The universe would yell at me, and my response was to double down and yell back. So the real challenge was telling people that I was leaving and that I meant it. Most difficult of all was telling my parents. Knowing they would counter my seemingly impulsive decision with a million questions and the world is a dangerous place parental concern, I prepared for breaking the news in a way that I hoped they would respond well to. With a PowerPoint presentation, complete with a budget, itinerary, vaccination records, my travel insurance records, and loose plans for the next step in my career. I think I'll apply for jobs back home from a co-working space while I'm in Bali, were my famous last words. So why Bali? To be honest, I really don't know the answer. I knew that I wanted to go to Asia, that I did a lot of research about it, that there was a large expat community here and many of these so-called digital nomads. And it came down to it being the cheapest plane ticket. So the day of my departure finally arrived, and my dad and Susan drove me to the Montreal airport for my flight. In typical Dill fashion, he was a ball of nerves the whole morning, double checking, did I have my passport? Did I pack everything I needed? Did I have my plane ticket? Despite my flight not departing until 9 p.m. that evening, he insisted that I arrive at the airport by 2 p.m. so that he could make it home before the sun went down. So I spent the next 5 hours sitting and waiting at the airport before I could even check my bags in. And then I spent another 2 hours sitting and waiting at the gate. And finally, it was time to board my flight, my 11-hour flight from Montreal to Doha, the first of 2 11-hour flights, I'll mention. And as soon as I got on that plane, I cried tears of happiness and disbelief. I think I was so proud of myself, and I couldn't believe that I was actually doing this. And that's when I realized that it takes a special kind of courage that not everyone has. It takes a lot for a 26-year-old kid to abandon everything and everyone I knew. Literally, I knew no one going to Bali. And as I cried tears of happiness, I also had this lingering feeling of, maybe I'm being reckless. Wait, were they tears of happiness? Was I anxious? Was I excited? I'm not really sure if I could tell you. I just knew that all of the emotions were coming out. And what I realized is that I had spent all this time leading up to my departure, white knuckling life. I thought it was impossible to let go because then everything would fall apart. And clenching myself and gripping everything so dang tight was the only way that I could hold it together. And it's kind of what I realized is that it's kind of like white knuckling a stress ball, and everything is clenched and the bulges are sticking out and nothing can move or breathe because you're squeezing it so hard. But when you let it all go, the ball returns to its natural shape. Things can move to where they belong and flow as they should. So I guess I started wondering, maybe if the better question is, why live a life where you need a stress ball at all? And so I let it all go. And I spent the first 3 days of my sabbatical in my homestay, crying and journaling and crying some more. I called my sister Claire back home, and in between ugly sobs, she's on here, she knows this, and in between ugly sobs, I asked, did I make a mistake? What am I doing? Should I come home? And she just laughed and was like, of course not. This is exactly what you need to get out and rediscover yourself. Like I was the only one who was going through these things. But the next day I signed up for a co-working space. And that was the moment that everything changed. The realization that I had just immersed myself in a multicultural environment without even trying. And I was all of a sudden surrounded by like-minded people who shared the vision of living life on their own terms. And here I was working alongside Americans, Brazilians, Argentinians, French, Germans, British, Italians, Russians, Japanese, Chinese, and Indonesian. And I realized like, this is where I'm supposed to be. In a place surrounded by people from all walks of life who made the exact same decision that I had made, that they wanted to live life, but in a different way. So I spent the remainder of my sabbatical exploring what I wanted out of life. This was the first opportunity I got to sit with myself and figure out what it is I really wanted and who I really was, without all the external noise. And a big part of this was learning to slow down long enough to hear the universe whisper. I no longer needed to hear that yell. So while I was supposed to be applying for jobs back home, I was instead researching online jobs and talking to every expat I came across about what they did for work, how they got into the industry, found their first clients, and what tips they might have for anyone wanting to start on the same path. I went to Bali with this intention of, eat, pray, love, and doing yoga and meditating. And instead I took up kickboxing and tried scuba diving, and I hiked an active volcano and started learning from the locals. I will say that Bali has a fascinating history and culture, and there's a reason that it is called the Island of the Gods. It's really like almost impossible to imagine or believe until you experience it firsthand. It's really a magical place. And I think that Asia is where the East meets the West. And I'm talking really broadly here, but it's amazing to see how the past and the future can blend together in the present. For example, every morning, the Balinese women wake up, they put on their traditional dress and take offerings to all of their temples. And there are literally temples everywhere, in front of every store and every home dwelling on the northeast corner, of course, in every road junction, every single entryway, whether it be a gate or a door or a driveway, and scattered down the beaches. But then in stark contrast, there's a pub on every corner where you can catch your favorite international football game and have a beer with friends. So it's like for every American, the day starts off with coffee and a bagel. And for the Balinese, the day starts off with an offering and a prayer. But how was I going to explain this to my family back home? I would reply to the, so how's your job search going? What's your plan? Calls from home with, I don't know yet. I'll let you know as soon as I figure it out. And I think this is when my parents really began to freak out. But me, I was cool as a cucumber. I knew that I had a plan and a goal, and that I just needed to be flexible about how I achieved it. Life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. So I trusted that it was going to unfold exactly as it should. The lesson I learned during this time is that opportunities and experiences fall into your lap when you get in touch with what you really want. When you tap into that energy of the universe or God's plan or whatever you want to call it, everything starts to fall into place. So by the end of my sabbatical, I returned home with a new plan. I was going to move to Bali in February of 2020 and work as a freelancer doing digital marketing. Fortunately, I had done quite a bit of work in this realm at my old job, so it was a natural progression. But nonetheless, and I had a client too. I had one client before leaving. But nonetheless, the first 6 months of this year, I was asked, but when are you going to come home and get a real job? Over and over and over again. And so my question to my dad is, what is the definition of a real job? Half the people I know back home work from their laptop at a desk in an office or from their house and count down the days until their 10-day holiday to a beautiful tropical island like Bali. But Bali is more than a holiday island. It's a real place with real people living real lives who also want the same things that we do: peace, joy, and contentment. They want a home to raise their children to be happy, and to have enough money to put food on the table. But the difference is that when they have more than they need, they share. When they see a neighbor who is struggling, they help. And during this pandemic, I have really witnessed humankind at its best. From afar, I've watched society back home segregate and further divide. Riots, months on end with no work, and being forced to isolate themselves. The media is promoting fear, and truly it's hard for me to imagine what this must be like. Here, on an island where tourism makes up 80% of the economy, without government aid during the pandemic and the borders being shut for more than 8 months and no sign of when they will reopen, the local people have been hit harder than anyone. And in stark contrast to the selfish nature of the West, the people here have band together, and I truly believe they'll come out stronger for it in the end. The dive master without work started seaweed farming. The driver without work has started fishing to provide food for their neighbors and community. The beach bar owner who employed the surf instructors can't provide a monthly salary, so instead he's spending his personal savings to feed his staff every night, making sure they have at least one meal a day. They may not have work right now, but they still gather at the beach around the bonfire every night, laughing and singing with friends, welcoming anyone who wants to join with open arms. But they don't just welcome you, they include you. Even when they have so little and are struggling to put food in their own stomachs, they insist that you join in eating with them, sharing what little they have with you. Does this sound familiar to the story of the businessman and the fisherman? Here, I live in a pair of flip-flops. Like, no, literally, I only have one. I have a small suitcase of clothes, my laptop, and cell phone. And to be honest, there are days that I feel like I have too much stuff. It seems now like a foreign concept to imagine having a closet full of clothes. Like, why did I need so much stuff in the first place? As I round out my first year as a digital expat in Bali, I am proud of myself for taking the leap of faith. Leaving the island of my comfort zone and burning the ship is terrifying. But my pride doesn't come, but what I realized is that my pride doesn't come from having a white picket fence in Connecticut or a dog and a mortgage. It comes from living my life on my own terms. The ability to live one day to the next and know that I'm still providing for myself and actually able to save money while doing everything that I want to do. I have found a passion in helping small and medium-sized businesses tell their story across digital platforms, but it wasn't easy to get here. I was tested on every single level. And what I realized is that that's the price that you have to pay to chase your dreams. I'm constantly learning new things, surrounding myself with others who are in the same industry, just further down the journey, and learning from them. Rather than going into an office, I go to a co-working space. It's a collaborative environment in which we all thrive. And there isn't that chronically grumpy coworker. Everyone's happy. And additionally, I don't have set office hours. If the waves are good, I'm gonna go surfing. If it's pouring rain, I'm gonna work from my bed. And quite frankly, there's nothing wrong with either of those things. I think that this lifestyle will become more popular post-pandemic, as Josh mentioned, as like in the US, as people realize that it's possible to be productive while also achieving a better work-life balance. A recent study found that 1 in 3 jobs in the US could be done remotely. And so I see this trend of being a digital nomad or a digital expat really growing in the US, as I think it's already sort of peaked in Europe. It's a really well-known term. So what I've learned is that expanding your worldview is crucial. If you distance yourself from your hometown and your home country for a while, your perspective starts to change. And with that comes an increased capacity for empathy. There's no right way to live. Many people meander through life waiting for retirement to provide some sort of closure or clarity, but they would be better served if they came to terms with what they wanted to do sooner rather than later. In fact, the sooner, the better. The more decisions and actions you take, the more things will happen in your life. And so the truth is, I have no idea what the future holds for me, but I think that's an exciting fact, not a terrifying one, because I get to shape it however I want. And yeah.
Very cool. And Josh, I think I saw a question or two already.
Yeah, guys, if you have questions, please post them here. I don't know, Susan, if they're coming directly to you, but
Did you see the one from Peaster, right? Or John? Who's it from? Unmute yourself and ask the question.
Hey, I have a question. This is
Okay.
so Hadley.
Mm-hmm.
You know that I'm Susan and Dill's CPA, right? And as a CPA,
Yeah.
am I going to hear Susan ranting and raving? Because I've heard it from other people about how they're having to fund you finding yourself.
So no, actually, they told me that they wish me all the best and that they gave me a lot of tough love and that I needed to figure it out on my own. I think that I wouldn't even call it tough love. It was just like, this is reality. If you want to do it, great, but you got to figure this out. And I think that a lot of what enabled me to be able to travel and do this is like the life skills that I was given when I was younger. You know, I'm so grateful. At the time, I thought Susan was crazy when I was 16 and she was making me fill out these expense reports about how I was spending my money. You know, I was like by $300 a month or whatever, and where it was all going, and like how to budget and all of that and plan. But now looking back on it, I think that's what enabled me to be able to make this kind of jump and figure things out independently.
Awesome. And so the thing is, because I think a lot of people do look and say, oh, well, you know, she's got mom and dad back home. And of course we're here, if anything all crashed and we needed to get her back home. But she's really taken this of, I've got to figure it out and be independent. And like she said, Hadley's saving money, which is awesome. And then John asked about when the pandemic hit, did you think about coming home?
It did cross my mind, but I was really lucky, I think, and I had a lot of friends here, like in a group of us just decided, you know, well, why would we go home? At the time when it really became clear that it was going to be a major issue in Europe, and the US was already being hit so hard, it just didn't make sense to like fly back into the eye of the storm. And like retrospectively looking back on it, I think it was a great thing for us to stay because the borders shut down in Bali and it remained relatively safe. I mean, the number of COVID cases, it's nothing like back home. And we've already maybe now back in July, like resumed normal life. Who knows what will happen when the borders reopen and how my perspective or things may change then, but I'm just going to wait and see.
Great. And then Hadley, Tim McGee made the comment that I probably had a harder time getting Dill to fill out the expense reports than you guys, which is true. But Tim wanted to know what, you know, you realized you didn't need as many clothes, but what is something you have missed from the States, maybe to miss the most?
I don't know what I'm really missing. I think it's just like, it's all in perspective, right? I was laughing with my friend about this tonight as I prepared for this call, thinking that, you know, it's actually cheaper for us to eat out. Like it's very normalized that we go out to eat because it's $1 for a hefty plate of food. Whereas, you know, a splurge for me was having like an apple with peanut butter because Jif was like $3 US. And that just, when you see it in rupiah, seems crazy. Like, I'm not going to spend that much. So it's just like, you can kind of get a little bit of everything that you want. You just have to, you have like sort of your priorities shift, I think.
Yeah, great. And then Hadley, I don't know if you saw, but Danielle gave you a shout out and said hello, her old boss.
I saw that. Yeah, go Hadley.
Oh, okay.
Thanks,
awesome.
Danielle.
Yeah. So any other questions for Hadley?
Yeah, Hadley, I've got one because I've done a bit of traveling myself. I don't think as much as you have when you were young, but curious to know from the digital expat side, and you say in your co-working space, you see these guys that have been out there longer, they're a few years ahead of you. Where do you see them transitioning from somebody new who just dropped in to somebody who's been doing this for 5 years or more? Where are they kind of going, and where do you see yourself continuing to follow that path or changing?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that it really depends on the person. For some, they're just like, totally, I want to live out of suitcase. I want to keep traveling, make home, you know, a place for like 5 months at a time, between like 2 and 5 months at a time, wherever that may be, and travel. And others that are kind of like, okay, I'm going to call it like Bali is the place I want to come home, or there's, you know, a big expat scene in Portugal or wherever, and sort of just like setting roots down there, which is why I lean more towards, I like the term digital expat than I do digital nomad, just because I think really we're not nomadic. That sort of insinuates that you're bouncing around all the time, whereas we're not.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So you'll be out there a while, I guess.
Yeah, I have no
good.
intentions of going anywhere.
Yeah, no, people ask me, when is Hadley coming home? And I'm like, you know, who knows, you know, maybe when she retires one day,
When
right?
there's a cheap airplane ticket.
Yeah.
Round trip back.
No, I'll be back. There's a wedding, I think, coming up next summer. I'll be back for that.
Yeah.
I was going to say next year for the wedding.
Yep, we got some plans coming. There's Claire. Awesome. All right. Any other
Oh, and-
questions? Oh, we have.
Yeah, I just saw one about.
Are the clients in the local? Are they in U.S. or Indonesia or where? So where are your clients?
So my clients are primarily in the U.S. I have a few that I actually from friends here that we kind of like do some work sharing. So I have a couple of clients that I do some work for in Europe. But, you know, we sort of joke here that, you know, I am literally living the American dream. I'm making US dollars and spending Indonesian rupiah. And so that's a pretty great, sweet spot to be.
Absolutely. So I'm going to put a shameless plug. Hadley is awesome. You know, you never know about your children until you actually have them work. And I put her on one of our clients, Atlanta Life, and I was really impressed with how good Hadley was with her strategic thinking and marketing brain and understanding of digital and social media and marketing. So I have to say, I'm proud of my daughter. She's pretty good.
Well,
So if you need any work, yeah, she's a great writer too. I swear.
So just like throw this in, Hadley, before. I believe one of the chores of you guys is to we talked about this, is to rename digital nomad and come up with some cool descriptor besides that, right?
Yeah.
Challenge for you and all your pals in the workspace to. I know there's something. I don't know what it is. I'm a grumpy old man.
I don't know, like economic refugees. I don't know.
Yes, now. To echo Susan,
why do we have to name everything,
Yeah,
right?
we
Just
do.
be you, right, Hadley? Be you. That's what
Yep.
you're learning.
Right.
So to your
Wait,
I was just going to mention, I had one more here comment, I guess, to follow up your comment, Susan. Hadley, you might have some business here. So I think if anybody wants to reach out to Hadley, if you could put your info on our Facebook page, Chris Bryan would love to, I think, get a hold of you about some things. So please put it on there. Let's see what we can do.
Awesome, yeah.
Okay, so
Great, thank
Josh,
you.
I got to end.
Thanks, guys.
You know what tomorrow is, right?
It's Susu's birthday.
Birthday. So I got
Oh.
to say happy birthday.
oh,
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday to you. Are we gonna sing really? Will that embarrass her, I think?
Happy birthday to
Too
you.
late.
Final
Yeah.
thought for you all. Come on, my thing won't boot up.
we're having technical issues. Surprise.
Hold on. All right. Yeah. It was this. Here's an old Dillism from I forget how long ago. It was in my journal that I looked up and said, "Richly fill your role, no matter how boring the task." And then I think Bill Fitzgerald must have added this because he said, "Act with intention, helmet on." And I'm pretty sure Bill Fitzgerald probably had a lot to do with that. A lot of you people know Billy passed away, tragic death. But anyway, anybody, the thoughts of the day are let's pray for the peace, joy, and contentment for the world right now, I think is the key thing. And anybody else got anything else? Josh, anybody out there?
Just a lot of best wishes for you, Hadley. That was a great one. Thanks so much for sharing, and we all wish you the best. So let's keep
Thank
following
you. Thanks, guys.
Thank goodness
Yeah.
for WhatsApp. We can talk for free. In fact, she was laughing the other day. Our internet was worse than her internet. So you never know.
Yeah.
Good to see you
Yeah.
too. All right. Hip, hip,
Hip, hip,
hooray.
Hooray!
Hip, hip, hooray.
Hooray!
Hooray.
Hip, hooray.
Great, thanks,
All right, have a
Hadley.
great week. Look forward to seeing everybody next Monday.
Bye, everybody.
Bye for
You guys.
now.
Bye.